The notification didn't just vibrate in my apron pocket. It felt like a physical blow. I stared at the screen, watching my mother type the words that ended my place in the family. She called me a loser for waitressing and told 30 relatives I was dead to her. I didn't cry. I just took a screenshot, knowing that while grief was a luxury I could not afford, evidence was free. The dinner rush at the Hearthstone Bistro was a physical weight, a dense fog of garlic butter, searing steak, and the low roar of 40 conversations happening at once. I balanced a tray of 3 filet mignons and a towering burger on my left shoulder. Navigating the narrow gap between tables 7 and 8, my feet throbbed in rhythm with my pulse. It was hour 9 of a double shift, the third one this week. At 33 years old, my body was holding up, but just barely. I dropped the plates with a practiced smile that did not reach my eyes, refilled water glasses, and ducked back into the kitchen. The heat hit me like a wall. "Hey, Grace?" It was Sarah, one of the younger servers, holding her phone out with a look on her face that sat somewhere between pity and morbid curiosity. She was 22, still young enough to think family drama was entertainment. "Your phone buzzed on the counter," she said. "I saw the preview. It looked bad, like really bad." I wiped my hands on my apron, the cheap polyester fabric rough against my palms. I did not want to look. I wanted to ignore it, finish my shift, go home to my drafty apartment, and sleep for 10 hours. But the knot in my stomach told me ignoring it was not an option. I picked up my phone. It was a notification from the Martin family update group chat. My mother, Diane, had created it 3 years ago to coordinate Thanksgiving and had never deleted it. It included everyone: my brother Ethan, aunts, uncles, 3 cousins, and even Mrs. Gable, a woman from her church choir who Diane included just to show off how large her family was. There was a new photo. It was a candid shot of me from 2 weeks ago, walking into the bistro in my uniform, looking tired, my hair pulled back in a messy bun. I did not know who had taken it. Underneath the photo, my mother had typed a message that took up the entire screen. "No place for losers in this family. Grace has decided to throw away her potential and embarrass us all by serving burgers instead of building a career. I am removing her from the will and from our lives. She is no longer family. Please do not contact her if you care about me." She had tagged everyone. I stared at the screen, the kitchen noise, the clatter of silverware, the hiss of the grill, the shouting of the line cooks, faded into a dull hum. It was not just the cruelty that stunned me. It was the public nature of it. She had not sent this to me privately. She had performed it. She wanted an audience. She wanted Mrs. Gable to see it. She wanted my cousins to see it. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. My first impulse was to scream back. I wanted to type that I was waitressing because I had to eat. I wanted to say that my corporate career had not just ended. It had been detonated by circumstances I still did not fully understand. I wanted to defend my dignity. But then I looked at the words again. No place for losers. Defending myself would only validate her. If I argued, I would look hysterical. I would look like the unstable daughter she was painting me to be. The humiliation was the point. She wanted me to break so she could point at the pieces and say, "See? I told you so." I took a breath that rattled in my chest. I did not type a single word. Instead, I pressed the side buttons on my phone. Click, screenshot. I scrolled up. Click, another screenshot of the group members list. Click, a screenshot of the timestamp. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the device. I opened my photo gallery, selected the images, and moved them into a new secure folder. I typed the name of the folder with cold, numb fingers. Receipts. "You okay?" Sarah asked, stepping closer. "I am fine," I said, my voice sounding strange and hollow to my own ears. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Table 4 needs ranch. I went back out onto the floor. I smiled at customers. I poured wine. I cleared plates. And with every step, I felt the severance. I was an orphan now. Not by death, but by decree. The cold air of Lakehurst, Vermont, usually woke me up after a shift. But that night, it just felt like another layer of isolation. The walk to my apartment took 20 minutes. The snow on the sidewalks was gray and packed down into ice, slick and unforgiving. I lived in a converted attic space above an old bakery. It smelled permanently of yeast and dust. It was small, but it was mine. Or at least, it was mine as long as I could pay the rent. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out my phone to call the electric company. I had a bill due and needed to check the balance. I dialed the number. The line went dead immediately. A recorded voice chirped in my ear. "This service has been suspended at the request of the account holder." I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. We had been on a family plan for a decade. It was cheaper that way. I sent my mother $50 every month for my share. I had sent it 3 days ago. She had cut me off. Panic, sharp and sudden, spiked in my chest. I needed this phone. My manager texted shifts. My bank sent 2-factor authentication codes. Without a phone, I was a ghost. I grabbed my laptop and flipped it open, waiting agonizing seconds for it to boot up. I needed to log into my email. I needed to see if she had touched anything else. A notification banner was waiting for me on the screen. Security alert. Recovery email changed. My stomach dropped. I clicked on it. It was for the cloud storage account. After my father died 4 years ago, I had kept his digital archives. It was nothing valuable to anyone else. Scans of his old journals, photos of our childhood trips to Maine, his recipe collection, and copies of our birth certificates. It was a digital shoebox of the man who had loved me when my mother had only tolerated me. I tried to log in, password incorrect. I clicked, forgot password. A verification code has been sent to digmail.com. She had hacked it, or more likely, she had used the recovery questions. She knew the name of my first pet. She knew the street I grew up on. She had locked me out of my father's memories on the same night she disowned me. I sat in the dark, the blue light of the laptop illuminating the small, shabby room. This was not just a tantrum. This was a siege. She was cutting lines of communication and erasing history. She wanted me to feel small. She wanted me to feel like I did not exist without her permission. A sharp knock on my door made me jump. It was late, past 11 at night. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Mara Klein, my landlord. Mara was a stern woman in her 60s who owned half the block and tolerated no nonsense. I opened the door a crack. "Mara, is everything okay?" She looked at me, her face tight. "You are 3 days late on the rent." "Grace, I know," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I get paid on Friday. I will have the money order for you by noon." Mara shifted her weight. She looked uncomfortable, which was rare for her. "Look, I like you. You're quiet. But I got a phone call today." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Who called you?" "A woman," Mara said. "Said she was a relative. She wanted to know if you were stable. She asked if there had been any loud noises, or if I had seen men coming and going at odd hours. She said she was worried you might be using again." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I have never used drugs." "Mara." "You know that?" Mara sighed, crossing her arms over her wool coat. "I told her I have never seen any trouble, but I run a respectable building. Grace, I cannot have drama, and I cannot have the police showing up because some family member thinks you are running a crack den. If the rent is not here by Friday, we are going to have a different conversation." She turned and walked down the stairs, her boots thumping heavy and loud. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the wood. My mother had found out where I lived. I had never told her, which meant she had looked it up or hired someone to find it, and she was poisoning the water. She was trying to make me homeless. I slid down the door until I hit the floor. I wrapped my arms around my knees. I did not cry. Crying implied that this could be fixed with emotion. This required strategy. The next day, the attack followed me to work. The bistro was prepping for lunch. I was rolling silverware in the back station, my fingers stained with polish, when the manager, David, called me into his office. David was a good guy. Usually, he let me take the leftover bread home and looked the other way when I was 5 minutes late. But today, he would not meet my eyes. He sat behind his cluttered desk, tapping a pen nervously against a stack of invoices. "Close the door." "Grace," he said. I closed it. The air in the office smelled of stale coffee and stress. "We got a complaint this morning," David said, "through the corporate feedback portal. About my service?" I asked. "No," he said. "About you. Personally." He turned his monitor so I could see it. It was an email from a generic address. Something like Concerned Citizen 55. "To the management, I am writing to warn you about an employee named Grace Martin. As a concerned family member who knows her history, I feel obligated to tell you that she has a history of mental instability and theft. She was fired from her previous corporate position for misappropriating funds. We are worried she might steal from guests or cause a scene. Please be careful." I read the words, and I felt a phantom sensation, like a hand closing around my throat. It was the same language used 2 years ago. Misappropriating funds, instability. "David," I said, looking up at him, "this is a lie. My mother is angry with me. She is trying to get me fired." David sighed and rubbed his temples. "I want to believe you. Grace, you are a hard worker. But this went to the district manager too. They are asking why we hired someone with a history." "I do not have a history," I said, my voice firm. "I have a background check on file. It is clean. You know it is clean." "I know," David said. "Look, I am not firing you. Not today. But you need to keep your head down. If one drawer is short $5, or if one customer complains you were rude, corporate is going to make me cut you. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. I walked out of the office. My hands were trembling again. This was how she did it. She did not need to come here and scream. She just planted seeds of doubt. Tiny little poison pills that would rot my life from the inside out. I went back to my section. Table 3 was occupied by a regular, Nina Park. Nina was a paralegal at a firm downtown. She came in every Tuesday and Thursday, ordered the Cobb salad, and read thick files while she ate. She was sharp, observant, and tipped 20% exactly. I poured her water. I tried to keep my hand steady, but the pitcher rattled against the glass. A splash of water hit the tablecloth. "I am so sorry," I said, grabbing a napkin. Nina did not look at the spill. She looked at my face. She took off her reading glasses and set them on the table. "You look like you are waiting for a ceiling tile to fall on your head," she said. I forced a smile. "It is just a long week." Nina studied me. She had dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to strip away the bullshit. "I heard you in the office," she said quietly. "The walls are thin." I froze. "I am not eavesdropping," she continued. But I heard the words theft and family member. I looked around. The restaurant was filling up, but nobody was close enough to hear us. "My mother is having a moment," I said. Nina took a sip of her water. "Is she the kind of person who just yells, or the kind who writes things down?" "She writes things down," I said. "She put it in a group chat. She emailed my boss." Nina nodded slowly. Good, I asked. "If they are willing to write lies, they are willing to sign them too." Nina said, "People like that get arrogant. They think paper is power. But paper is a trap if you know how to read it." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. She slid it across the table, under the edge of her salad plate. "I am not a lawyer," she said. "I am the person who organizes the mess so the lawyer can win. If you find anything, documents, letters, filings, that does not look right, you bring it to me. I eat here twice a week. I do not like seeing good servers get bullied." I looked at the card. Nina Park, paralegal, Westlake Associates. "Thank you," I said. "Keep the receipts." "Grace," she said, picking up her fork. "Keep everything." My next day off was Thursday. I did not spend it sleeping. I spent it on a bus heading to the outskirts of town, to a place called Harbor Gate Storage. It was a desolate facility. Rows of orange corrugated metal doors surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. My father had rented a small 5x5 unit here years ago to store his overflow, things my mother would not allow in the pristine, beige aesthetic of her house. I had the key on my ring. It was a small brass key that I had kept since the day he died. I needed to see what was in there. I needed to feel close to him, and I needed to know if my mother had poisoned this too. I signed in at the front desk. The guy behind the counter was watching a game show on a portable TV and barely looked up. "Unit 402, I said. He spun the logbook around. "Sign and date." I picked up the pen. I looked at the previous entries on the page. My heart stopped. There was a signature on the line above where I was about to write. It was dated 3 weeks ago, Diane Martin, and next to her name, in the column for authorized by, it said, "Notarized auth on file." I stared at the date. My father had been the only name on the lease. I knew this because I had helped him fill out the paperwork when I was 20. He had explicitly kept it in his name because he wanted a place that was solely his. "Excuse me," I said to the guy. "Yeah? This entry?" I said, pointing to my mother's name. "How did she get in?" "The unit is in Joseph Martin's name." The guy squinted at the page. "Says she had a notarized authorization, a power of attorney or something. We keep copies in the back, but Joseph Martin died 4 years ago." I said. The guy shrugged. "I do not know. Lady, if the paper has a stamp and a date, we let them in. That is the policy." "Can I see the authorization?" I asked. He hesitated. "Are you on the list?" "I am his daughter. I have the key." He looked at the key in my hand, then at my face. He sighed, annoyed at having to do actual work. "Fine, but make it quick." He swiveled his chair to a filing cabinet, rummaged for a minute, and pulled out a photocopy of a document. He slapped it on the counter. I looked at it. It was a standard grant of access form. It had my father's signature at the bottom. It had a notary stamp from a woman named Riley Latham, and it was dated October 14th of this year. My father had been dead for 4 years. Someone had forged his signature. And not just forged it, they had done a sloppy job of it, dating it for the present day as if he were still alive and walking around. Signing permission slips for my mother to rifle through his belongings. "Did she take anything?" I asked, my voice tight. The guy glanced at the computer screen. "Log says they moved out 4 boxes. Who is they?" "Says here she had a helper. Ethan Martin, my brother." I felt a wave of nausea. Ethan, the golden boy. Ethan, who drove a leased BMW and told everyone he was an entrepreneur in the import sector. He had helped her loot our dead father's storage unit using a forged document. I thanked the guy, my voice barely audible, and walked out to the unit. I unlocked the padlock and rolled up the orange door. It was mostly empty. The shelves where my father had kept his old tax returns and legal files were bare. The dust outline of the boxes was still visible. They had taken the paperwork. They had left the fishing gear and the old coats, but they had taken the paper. Why? I stood in the cold storage unit, the wind whistling through the gap in the door, and I let the memory wash over me. I remembered the day my corporate life ended. I had been a senior consultant at Alder Fitchwell. I was on track for partner. Then came the anonymous complaint to HR. Someone claimed I had shared confidential client data. There was no proof, but there was a file that appeared. Emails that looked like mine but were not. Logs that showed access times when I was asleep. I remembered my mother's reaction when I was fired. She had not been angry. She had been satisfied. "You always aimed too high. Grace," she had said, "some people are just meant for simpler lives. You should come home." I had thought she was just being her usual passive-aggressive self, but standing here, looking at the empty shelves, the pieces clicked together with a terrifying precision. The complaint 2 years ago, the disowning text this week, the phone cutoff, the landlord call, the smear to the bistro manager, and now, the theft of my father's records. She was not just lashing out. She was cleaning house. She was hiding something, and she needed me discredited, poor, and broken, so that no one would believe me if I found it. She had underestimated me. She thought I was the loser daughter who would curl up and disappear. She thought that by taking my money and my name, she took my power. I closed my eyes and pictured my father. He was a quiet man, a man who checked the locks 3 times and kept carbon copies of everything. Check the fine print. Gracie, he used to tell me, the truth is always in the boring parts. I opened my eyes. I took out my phone. I took a picture of the empty shelves. Then I walked back to the front office. I need a copy of that access log. I told the guy, I cannot give you. I have the key, I said, leaning over the counter. I am the executor of his personal effects. If you do not give me a copy of the log showing who accessed this unit with a forged document, I will bring the police back here and we can talk about why your facility allows access based on a signature from a dead man. The guy paled. He hit print. I walked out of Harbor Gate with the access log folded in my pocket. I did not have much. I had $80 in my bank account. I had a job that was hanging by a thread. I had a landlord who was watching me like a hawk. But I had the log, and I had a name. Riley Latham, Notary Public. I was not going to beg my mother for forgiveness. I was not going to fight her on Facebook or scream at her in the group chat. I was going to find out what was in those boxes. I boarded the bus back to town. As the gray landscape of Vermont rolled by, I pulled out my phone and opened the receipts folder. I added the photo of the access log. Game on, Mom. I watched the reflection of my own eyes in the window. They looked tired. Yes, but they looked sharp. Harder than they had been yesterday. I was done being the victim. I was going to be the disaster she never saw coming. The next Tuesday. The bistro was slow. A lull between the lunch rush and the early dinner crowd. I stood at table 4, my hands tucked behind my back, watching Nina Park examine the photocopy I had stolen from the storage facility. Nina did not read like normal people read. She scanned. Her eyes darted back and forth, dissecting the document structure before she even looked at the words. She had a red pen in her hand, and she tapped it rhythmically against the tablecloth. "This is sloppy," Nina said, her voice low. She spun the paper around so I could see it. She pointed the tip of her pen at the top line where my father's name was printed. "Look at the middle initial," she said. I leaned in. Joseph A. Martin. My father's middle name was Edward. His initial was E. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. "That is wrong," I whispered. "His middle name was Edward." Nina nodded. "Exactly. And look at the notary stamp down here. Riley Latham. See the commission expiration date?" I squinted. It said expires, May 2026. "So?" I asked. "So," Nina said, tapping the date again. "The formatting is wrong for a Vermont stamp issued in that cycle. Vermont changed their seal requirements 2 years ago. The border on this stamp is the old style. But the date is new. It looks like someone ordered a custom rubber stamp online and did not check the current state guidelines. It is a fake. A bad one." I stared at the paper. It was one thing to suspect my mother of bullying. It was another to look at proof of a felony. They forged his name. I said, the reality sitting heavy in my stomach, and they did not even know his middle name? "Your brother probably filled it out," Nina said, her tone dry. "He does not strike me as a detail-oriented person." "But the facility accepted it. That is the problem. It gave them legal cover to enter the unit." "What do I do?" I asked. "You need more paper," Nina said. "If they are willing to fake a storage authorization, what else have they faked?" "You said your father died 4 years ago?" "Yes. Go to the county records office," she said. "Pull the death certificate and the estate disposition forms. See who signed for his personal effects. If they used a fake initial here, they might have made mistakes there too." The Lakehurst County Records Office was in the basement of the courthouse, a room that smelled of dry paper and lemon floor cleaner. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. I filled out the request form with a pen attached to the counter by a metal chain. The clerk, a woman with glasses on a beaded chain, took my form and disappeared into the back for 20 minutes. When she returned, she slid a manila folder across the counter. "Copy costs 50 cents a page," she said without looking up. I opened the folder. The death certificate was there. Standard and sad. Cause of death, myocardial infarction. I skipped past it, my chest tightening. I did not want to relive the grief. I wanted the logistics. I found a document titled Release of Personal Effects. It was the form the hospital used to release his watch, his wallet, and his clothes to the next of kin. The signature at the bottom was my mother's, Diane Martin. That was expected, but the address field caught my eye. Under next of kin address, she had not written our family home address on Willow Creek Road. She had written 14 Maple Drive, Unit B, Lakehurst, VT. I frowned. I knew Maple Drive. It was on the other side of town, near the industrial park. It was a rental district. My parents had owned their house on Willow Creek for 30 years. Why would she list a random rental unit as her address on the day my father died? I paid the clerk $3 for the copies. I walked out into the cold afternoon, the wind biting at my exposed cheeks. I pulled up the Maps app on my phone and typed in 14 Maple Drive. It was a small duplex. I stood on the courthouse steps, shivering, a fake address on a legal form, a fake middle initial on a storage authorization. My mother was not just hiding things. She was creating a completely parallel paper trail. That evening, the bistro was a war zone. We were down a runner, and the kitchen was backed up by 20 minutes. I was sprinting between the bar and the dining room, my mind still stuck on the address on Maple Drive. I had a 4-top at table 12, the VIP table in the corner. It was 3 men in expensive suits. They had ordered the most expensive bottle of Cabernet on the list and were talking loudly about yield curves. I approached the table with the bottle. I presented the label to the man who had ordered it. He was younger than the others, maybe late 30s, with sharp features and a tailored charcoal suit. The 2018 Silver Oak, sir, I said. He looked up. His eyes met mine, and he froze. The polite, detached expression of a wealthy diner vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine shock. He looked at my face, then down at the name tag pinned to my apron. Grace? Grace Martin? He asked. The other 2 men stopped talking and looked at me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I recognized him now. Julian Voss. He was a private wealth manager. We had never worked directly together, but we had been in the same circles. I had seen him at industry conferences when I was still a consultant at Alder and Fitchwell. Yes, I said, keeping my voice professional. Good evening, Mr. Voss. He stared at me for a second too long. He looked at the apron, the tray in my hand, the busy restaurant behind me. It was the look I dreaded most. Recognition mixed with confusion. What is a rising star consultant doing pouring wine in a mid-range bistro? I did not know you were back in Lakehurst, he said, recovering his composure. I live here now, I said. I opened the wine, my movements practiced but stiff. Would you like to taste? He nodded, distracted. I poured the splash. He swirled it but didn't drink. He just watched me. I served the wine and retreated to the safety of the kitchen. My heart was pounding. It was humiliating. 2 years ago, I could have been sitting at that table discussing strategy. Now I was the help. When I dropped the check later that night, the other 2 men had already gone to the coat check. Julian was still sitting there, nursing the last of his wine. I placed the leather folder on the table. Thank you, Mr. Voss. Grace, he said quietly. I stopped. Yes? He looked around the restaurant to make sure no one was within earshot. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. He slid it across the table. Face down. I saw a compliance memo, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. I stiffened. What? About 2 years ago. He said, I was doing due diligence on a merger that involved Alder and Fitchwell. I saw your name in a risk assessment file. I gripped the edge of the table. What did it say? He hesitated. It used the phrase controlled reputational event. The room seemed to tilt. In the corporate world, reputational event meant a scandal. But controlled? Controlled meant it was not an accident. It meant it was executed. I do not understand. I said. Julian looked at me with an intensity that scared me. It means your firing was not a result of bad performance. Grace, it was a product. Someone bought it. He tapped the card. Call me if you want to know the rest, but not on a work line. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. I stood there, the restaurant noise crashing around me, staring at the card. Controlled reputational event. My career had not just imploded, it had been demolished, and someone had paid for the wrecking ball. I met Julian Voss 2 days later at a coffee shop 3 towns over. He had insisted on the distance. He was sitting in the back corner, wearing a baseball cap and a hoodie, looking nothing like the slick wealth manager from the bistro. He looked nervous. "Thank you for coming," I said, sitting opposite him. He didn't smile. He pushed a lukewarm latte around on the table. "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this. In my line of work, discretion is the only currency. If anyone knows I'm talking to you, I lose my license." "Then why are you?" I asked. He looked up. "Because I saw you waiting tables." "Grace, you were the sharpest analyst in the Northeast region. When I saw the file 2 years ago, I assumed you had actually done something terrible. Insider trading, embezzlement, something that justified the scorch-the-earth policy they used on you. But seeing you there, you aren't living off offshore accounts. You are working double shifts." He took a breath. "The memo was from a firm called Briar Hollow Capital. They requested a liability containment strategy regarding you." "Briar Hollow?" I asked. "I have never worked for them. I do not even know them. They are a boutique equity firm." Julian said, "They specialize in distressed assets. But here's the part that stuck with me. The memo referenced a family pressure point. It said that the subject, you, could be neutralized by leveraging personal family dynamics. It specifically mentioned that internal family actors were cooperative." The air left my lungs. Internal family actors. My mother. "Are you saying my family helped get me fired?" I asked, my voice trembling. Julian leaned in. "I am saying that a third-party firm paid to have your reputation destroyed, and the strategy document cited cooperation from your family as a key success factor. They wanted you out of that job. Grace, they wanted you without income and without credibility." "Why?" I asked. "I am nobody." Julian shook his head. "That is the question you need to answer. But I can tell you this. Briar Hollow Capital does not spend $50,000 on a takedown unless there is millions at stake. You are in the way of something." He stood up. "That is all I know. Do not contact me again." He left me sitting there with my cold coffee, my world rearranging itself into a horror movie. Internal family actors were cooperative. My mother had not just kicked me when I was down. She had helped push me. She had collaborated with a financial firm to destroy my career. I went home and immediately opened my laptop. My hands were shaking so bad I had to retype my password 3 times. I needed to see the damage. If they had been planning this for 2 years, how deep did it go? I logged into a free credit monitoring site. I had checked it 6 months ago, and it had been grim but stable. I clicked on Open Accounts. The list populated. Student loan, closed. Credit card, Chase, active. Auto loan, closed. Personal line of credit, Northlake Federal, active. I stared at the last line. Northlake Federal, active. I did not have a line of credit at Northlake Federal. I had closed that account 5 years ago when I moved my banking to a national chain. I clicked on the details. Status, reopened. Date, reopened. August 14th, balance, $12,000. I felt sick. Someone had reopened an old zombie account and maxed it out. I grabbed my phone, the burner phone I had bought with cash the day after my mother cut my line, and called the bank. I waited on hold for 20 minutes, pacing the small length of my apartment. Finally, a representative answered. "Northlake Federal. This is Karen." "Hi," I said. "My name is Grace Martin. I am looking at my credit report and I see a line of credit that should be closed." "One moment, Ms. Martin. Let me pull you up." I heard typing. "Okay, I see the account here." Karen said, "It was reactivated in August." "Reactivated by whom?" I asked. "By you, ma'am," Karen said. "We received a call verifying your identity, and since the account was still in our system, just dormant, we reactivated it. I did not call you," I said. Karen's voice got suspicious. "Well, the caller verified all the security questions. Mother's maiden name, high school mascot, first street you lived on." I closed my eyes. Internal family actors. Of course they verified the questions. My mother knew her own maiden name. She knew where I went to high school. She knew the street. The caller passed verification. Karen said firmly, and the funds were dispersed to a joint checking account linked to the profile. Joint checking? I asked. Who is the other name on the joint account? Let me see. Diane Martin. I hung up. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I sat down on the floor and stared at the wall. $12,000. She had stolen $12,000 in my name. She had reopened an account I had forgotten about, used her own knowledge of my life to bypass security, and drained the money. This wasn't just about control anymore. This was survival. If she was taking loans in my name, she could bury me in debt I would never escape. She could ensure I stayed a waitress forever. Too broke to hire a lawyer. Too busy surviving to fight back. I stood up. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed my passport. I grabbed my birth certificate. I walked to the downtown branch of Northlake Community Bank. A different bank. A small rival to the one my mother used. I sat down with a banker named Mr. Henderson. He was an older man with kind eyes. I need to open a new account, I said. And I need to lock it down, Mr. Henderson smiled. We can certainly help with that. Standard checking? No, I said. I want to place a verbal password on the account. Nothing can be done. No transfers, no balance checks, no password resets, without a spoken passphrase that is not written down anywhere. Mr. Henderson looked surprised. That is a high level of security. Is everything okay? I am separating my finances from a difficult situation. I said. He nodded. I understand. What would you like the phrase to be? I thought for a moment. I thought about the bistro. I thought about the receipts. I thought about the war I was in. The bill comes due. I said. Mr. Henderson typed it in. The bill comes due. After I left the bank, I went to the library. I used a public computer to access the credit bureaus. I placed a freeze on my social security number. I added a fraud alert. I locked everything. It felt like I was boarding up windows before a hurricane. I met Nina at the bistro an hour before my shift started. I slid into the booth opposite her. I looked wreck. I had not slept. You look like you have seen a ghost, Nina said. I saw my credit report. I said, she stole $12,000. She reopened an old account. Nina's face went hard. That is identity theft. Pure and simple. You can go to the police. I shook my head. Not yet. If I go to the police now, she will claim it was a misunderstanding, that it was family money, that I authorized it verbally. She is charming. Nina, she is a respectable widow. I am the unstable daughter who got fired for a reputational event. I told her what Julian had said, about the compliance memo, about the liability containment strategy. Nina listened, her mouth slightly open. This is... Grace, this is sophisticated. This is not just a mean mom. This is a corporate operation. I know. I said, I need to know why. Why am I a liability? What is so important that they had to ruin my life to hide it? Nina tapped her fingers on the table. The storage unit, it always comes back to the paper. If they forged a document to get in there, whatever they took is the key. I need to know exactly when they went in, I said, and I need to know if there is video. Then let's write a letter. Nina said. She pulled out a legal pad. To the management of Harborgate Storage. Unauthorized access to Unit 402. This letter serves as a formal notice of potential fraudulent access. Nina dictated, and I wrote. The language was cold, precise, and threatening. We demanded access logs, video surveillance timestamps, and copies of all authorizations. We cited statutes about negligence and duty of care. By the time we finished, the letter looked like a weapon. Mail it certified. Nina said, return receipt requested. Make them sign for it. Once they sign, they cannot claim they lost the tapes. I took the letter. My hands were trembling again, but not from fear this time. From adrenaline. I am building a case, I said. Nina smiled, a fierce, sharp smile. Yes, you are. And Grace? Yeah? When you take this down, I want to be there to watch. I mailed the letter on my way home. The post office clerk stamped it with a heavy thud that felt satisfying. I walked back to my apartment in the dark. The streetlights reflected off the icy pavement. I felt exposed. If my mother had people watching me, if she had Julian's firm watching me, was I safe walking home? I hurried up the stairs to my attic unit. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, locking the deadbolt behind me immediately. I turned on the light. There was a white envelope lying on the floor, just inside the door. I froze. I had been gone all day. Someone had slid it under the door. I looked at the hallway. It was empty. I picked up the envelope. It was plain. Cheap white paper. No return address. Just my name. Grace, written in block letters. I opened it. Inside was a single photocopy. It looked like a page from a small spiral notebook. The paper was lined. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was cramped, slanted, and meticulous. It was my father's handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. I sat down on the edge of the bed, holding the paper under the lamp. It was a list of reminders. Change oil in the truck. Call the plumber about the sink. Buy birdseed. But at the bottom of the page, one line had been circled in thick red ink. The ink looked fresh, or at least newer than the photocopy. If Diane ever turns Grace into the scapegoat, check the trust addendum. I stared at the words. Scapegoat. Trust addendum. My father had known. He had predicted this. He knew my mother well enough to know that one day she might turn on me, and he had left a safeguard. But what trust addendum? I had seen the will. It was simple. Everything to my mother. I turned the paper over. There was nothing on the back. I looked at the door again. Who had delivered this? Was it an ally? Or was it a trap? Check the trust addendum. I did not know where the trust addendum was, but I knew someone who might. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I went to the window and looked out at the street below. A black sedan was parked across the street, engine running, exhaust puffing into the cold air. As I watched, it pulled away and disappeared around the corner. I was not just a waitress anymore. I was a liability, and I was about to become a threat. The morning sun hit the peeling paint on my windowsill, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the photocopy of the notebook page my father had written. Check the trust addendum. The phrase was a lifeline thrown from the grave, but it was also a riddle. My father had been a meticulous man, but he was also a creature of habit. He used the same mechanic for 20 years, the same barber, and the same accountant. If there was a trust addendum, it would be with the only lawyer he had ever trusted. I pulled out my laptop and searched for Weller & Ross, LLP. It was a small firm in the older part of Lakehurst, a brick building that had been there since the 1950s. I remembered waiting in their lobby as a child, swinging my legs on a leather chair while my father signed mortgage papers. I dressed in my most professional clothes, a black blazer I had saved from my corporate days, and a crisp white shirt. I needed to look like Grace Martin, the consultant, not Grace Martin, the waitress. I needed them to take me seriously. The office of Weller & Ross smelled exactly as I remembered: old paper, furniture polish, and peppermint. The receptionist was a woman I did not recognize, young and guarded, sitting behind a high mahogany desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking over her glasses. "My name is Grace Martin," I said, keeping my voice level. My father was Joseph Martin. He was a client of Mr. Weller. The receptionist typed something into her computer. "Mr. Weller retired 3 years ago," she said. "Mr. Ross handles his remaining files. I am looking for a document regarding my father's estate." I said, specifically, a trust addendum. She frowned at the screen. The Martin file was closed in 2021. The estate was settled. I know the main estate was settled. I said, "But I have reason to believe there was an addendum that was not executed. I need to see the file." She hesitated. "Are you the executor?" My mother, Diane Martin, was the executor. I said, "But I am a beneficiary." She clicked the mouse a few times. "I am sorry. Ms. Martin, I see the file here, and there is a note about an addendum drafted in 2019, but the only listed beneficiary on the primary trust instrument is Diane Martin." My heart hammered against my ribs. That cannot be right. My father wrote a note specifically telling me to check it. The receptionist looked sympathetic but firm. Unless you are named in the active document, or you are the executor, I cannot show you the file. Attorney-client privilege extends to the executor. If your mother is the only beneficiary listed, she is the only one who can authorize access. But if the addendum changes the beneficiary to me, then I have a right to see it. I argued, if the addendum was signed and filed. Yes, she said, but if it was just a draft, or if it was never formally executed, then the old rules apply, and right now, the system shows Diane Martin as the sole party. I gripped the edge of the desk. My mother had not just beaten me, she had walled me out. She had ensured that even if a document existed, I could not get close enough to prove it. Is there anyone else who might have a copy? I asked, desperate. The receptionist lowered her voice. Mr. Weller was old school. He sometimes kept duplicate originals for clients who were worried about family disputes. He usually told them to give a copy to a trusted third party. I thanked her and walked out into the cold air. My father did not have many friends. He was quiet, but there was one man he had spent every Saturday morning with for 15 years. Bellamy's Hardware was on Main Street, a relic of a time before big box stores. The floors were creaky wood, and the air smelled of sawdust and oil. Thomas Bellamy was behind the counter, counting screws into a paper bag. He looked older than I remembered, his hair completely white, his shoulders stooped. "Thomas?" I called out. He looked up, squinting. "Grace? Grace Martin?" He came around the counter and enveloped me in a hug that smelled of cedar shavings. It had been years since I had seen him. I had been too busy with my career, and then too ashamed of my downfall, to visit. "Look at you," he said, pulling back. "You look just like Joe. Around the eyes. How are you?" "Thomas?" I asked. "Surviving," he said. "Business is slow, but I own the building, so they cannot kick me out." He looked at me closely. "You did not come here to buy nails." "Grace," I took a deep breath. "Mom disowned me." "Thomas." He did not look surprised. He sighed, a long, rattling sound in his chest. I heard, "She came in here last week, told me not to extend you any credit if you came in, said you were on drugs." I felt the sting of tears but blinked them back. "I am not on drugs. I know that," he said softly. "I threw her out of the store, told her she was a bitter woman and that Joe would be ashamed." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Come to the back office." I followed him into a small, cluttered room behind the paint mixer. He moved a stack of invoices off a chair for me. "I went to the law firm today," I said. "They said there might be a trust addendum, but they cannot show it to me because Mom is the only beneficiary on file." Thomas nodded slowly. Joe was worried about that. Towards the end, he knew his heart was bad. And he knew Diane was difficult. She always wanted to control the narrative. If Joe bought a blue car, she would tell everyone it was green until he just gave up and agreed with her. He opened a rusty filing cabinet in the corner. He dug through a folder labeled Receipts 1999, my father's old joke, hiding important things in boring places. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. The edges were yellowed, and the seal was unbroken. He gave this to me about 2 months before he passed. Thomas said, "He made me promise to keep it in the safe." He said, "Tom, if Grace ever comes to you looking for answers, you give her this. If she never comes, you burn it." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. It felt heavy. "Go ahead," Thomas said. I tore open the seal. Inside was a smaller envelope and a single sheet of notebook paper. I unfolded the paper first. It was a letter, written in my father's cramped hand. "My dearest Grace, if you are reading this, I have failed you twice. First, by leaving the world too soon, and second, by not standing up to your mother while I was here. I love Diane, but I know how she gets when she feels insecure. She tightens her grip until she crushes the thing she is holding. I have seen how she looks at your career. She is jealous. Grace, she hates that you escaped her orbit. I worry that when I am gone, she will try to bring you back down to earth, just so she can be the one to pick you up. I cannot let her take your future. There is an addendum to the trust. It creates a safety net for you, independent of her control, but knowing Diane, she might try to bury it. I placed the original signed copy in a safe deposit box at Lakehurst Federal Credit Union. The box is in my name, but I have listed you as the deputy with access upon my death. Box number 314. Key code 7920. Forgive me for not being stronger. Be brave. You were always the best of us. Love, Dad. Tears finally spilled over, hot and fast. He had known. He had watched the dynamic between my mother and me and had tried to build a shield for me. Thank you, Thomas, I whispered. Thomas patted my shoulder. He was a good man. Grace, he just wanted peace, but sometimes peace costs a lot of fighting. I left the hardware store with the letter pressed against my chest inside my coat. I had a direction now. Lakehurst Federal Credit Union, Box 314. I walked 6 blocks to the credit union. It was a modern building, glass and steel. A stark contrast to the hardware store. I approached a teller. I need to access a safe deposit box. I said, Box 314. My father, Joseph Martin, was the owner. I have the key code. The teller typed it in. I am sorry, she said. That box was closed. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Closed? When? Last week, she said. October 14th. October 14th. The same day the storage unit was accessed. Who closed it? I asked, my voice rising. My father is dead. I am the deputy. The teller turned her screen so she could read the notes. It says the box was drilled and the contents surrendered to the executor, Diane Martin, who presented a power of attorney authorizing her to consolidate estate assets. A power of attorney again, but a power of attorney expires when a person dies. I said, gripping the counter. You cannot use a POA for a dead man. You need an executor letter. The teller looked uncomfortable. The notes say the manager approved it based on the documentation provided. It says durable power of attorney, recent. It was the same trick. My mother, or Ethan, had presented a forged or backdated document claiming my father had authorized them to empty the box before he supposedly died. Or they had confused the bank into accepting a document that looked legal enough to pass a cursory glance. They had drilled the box. They had taken the addendum. I walked out of the bank and stood on the sidewalk, feeling the cold seep into my bones. They were erasing him, every safeguard he had left, every breadcrumb. They were sweeping away before I could get to it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Nina. Come to the bistro, she texted. I have the storage logs. Nina was sitting at our usual table, but she was not eating. She had a stack of papers spread out, and her laptop was open. I sat down. They got the box. I said flatly. They drilled it last week. The addendum is gone. Nina's jaw tightened. They are thorough. I will give them that. But they are also arrogant, and arrogant people make mistakes. She slid a piece of paper toward me. This came in the mail today. Certified return receipt from Harborgate Storage. They legally had to comply with your demand letter. I looked at the log. It was a spreadsheet. 3 entries for Unit 402. October 14th, 10 o'clock a.m. Entry, Diane Martin. Ethan Martin. Guest, R. Latham. October 14th, 10:45 a.m. Exit, Diane Martin. Ethan Martin. Guest, R. Latham. October 15th, 9:12 a.m. Entry, Ethan Martin. R. Latham. The notary. She was there. I said, she actually went to the storage unit with them. Nina nodded, which is highly irregular. A notary usually stamps the paper and leaves. They do not go on field trips to help loot storage units. Unless she was there to witness them opening something on site? I asked. Or unless she is a friend. Nina said. Or she was paid to be a lookout. Nina turned her laptop around. I ran a search on Riley Latham in the county clerk's database. She is a mobile notary. Got her commission 2 years ago. No criminal record. But she has 1 complaint filed against her 6 months ago. What kind of complaint? A mortgage signing. The borrower claimed Riley stamped the documents without checking ID. The state board investigated but let her off with a warning because she claimed it was an honest mistake. Sloppy, I said. or desperate. Nina corrected. I dug a little deeper. Riley Latham is 24. She works out of her apartment, and according to her social media, which she foolishly left public, she has been posting about how hard it is to pay off her student loans. Nina pointed to a post from 3 weeks ago. Finally got a gig that pays real money. Rent is covered for the month. Thank God. 3 weeks ago, right around the time my mother raided the storage unit, she was bought. I said, and if she was bought, Nina said, she can be squeezed. I found Riley Latham's number on her professional website. I did not call from my burner phone. I called from the bistro's landline. So the caller ID would look generic. Riley Latham, mobile notary. A voice answered. She sounded young, breathless, like she had just run up a flight of stairs. Hi, Riley, I said, putting on my best corporate assistant voice. This is Sarah from the county clerk's office regarding an estate audit. There was a pause. Oh, hi. Is something wrong? We are just verifying some records for the Joseph Martin estate. I said, we have a grant of access form you notarized on October 14th. We just need to confirm the location of the signing. Silence. Then, I go to a lot of signings. I would have to check my logbook. The record shows you were physically present at Harborgate Storage. I said, is that correct? Riley's voice pitched up an octave. Yeah. I met the client there. That is allowed. I am a mobile notary, and you witnessed Joseph Martin sign the document at the storage unit on October 14th? I asked. The silence this time was heavy. Riley, I said, dropping the perky voice. My name is Grace Martin. Joseph Martin was my father. He died 4 years ago. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Listen, I did not know. Riley stammered. They told me he was sick. They said he was in the car and could not come out. In the car? I asked. So you did not see him sign it? The woman. Diane. She said he signed it at home. Riley said, the words tumbling out. She said they just needed the stamp to get the boxes out because he was in the hospital. She was crying. She seemed so nice. She paid you, didn't she? I asked. Riley did not answer. How much? Riley? $500, she whispered. Cash? And who gave you the cash? The son. The guy in the BMW. Ethan. My knuckles were white on the receiver. Ethan. And the form? I asked. Who filled out the form? The son did. Riley said. He had a folder of papers. He filled it out on the hood of the car while the mom talked to me. He told me just to stamp it and not worry about the details. He said it was just family stuff. Just old junk. Riley, listen to me carefully. I said, you just admitted to a felony. You notarized a signature you did not witness for a man who is dead in exchange for a cash bribe. Please, Riley sobbed. I need this license. I cannot lose my job. Then you are going to help me fix it, I said. When the time comes, you are going to tell the truth to a lawyer or to a judge. I cannot. They said they would sue me if I told anyone. Who said that? The mom, Diane. She texted me afterward. She said if I ever mentioned the cash, she would report me to the state board for fraud. I closed my eyes. My mother was blackmailing the girl she had bribed. It was classic Diane. She made everyone complicit so no one could speak. Keep the text, Riley. I said, do not delete it. If you keep that text, you are a witness. If you delete it, you are an accomplice. Do you understand? Yes, Riley whispered. I hung up. I sat there in the empty bistro office, staring at the phone. My mother and Ethan had staged a play, the crying widow, the helpful son. They had used a desperate 24-year-old girl to break the law. And Ethan, he was the one filling out the forms. He was the one handing out the cash. Why? Ethan usually avoided conflict. He was lazy. He liked the path of least resistance. Why was he risking jail time for old tax returns? I went back out to Nina. Riley talked. I said, Diane paid her $500 cash. Ethan filled out the forms. And Diane threatened to report her if she talked. Nina shook her head. Your mother is a piece of work. But why is Ethan so involved? I thought he was the successful one, the importer. So did I. I said, Nina tapped her keyboard. I have been looking into Ethan while you were on the phone. I tried to find this Summit Ridge Auto Imports company he claims to run. And it exists, Nina said. But it is a shell. No employees, no physical address other than a P.O. box. And it has 4 liens against it for unpaid taxes. She turned the screen to me. But look at this. It was a public record from the Vermont family court system. A support modification hearing from 6 months ago. It involved Ethan's ex-girlfriend, who was suing him for child support for a kid I vaguely knew existed but had never met. In the filing, Ethan's income was listed. Source of income, familial support, gift, employment status, unemployed. And there, in the section for household composition, was a note from the judge. Respondent is claimed as a dependent on the tax return of Diane Martin for the years 2023 and 2024. I stared at the screen. He is a dependent. I said, he is 35 years old, and my mother claims him as a dependent. He is broke. Grace, Nina said, the BMW is probably leased in her name. The clothes, the trips, it is all her money. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Ethan was not the golden child. He was a hostage. My mother was supporting him completely, and because she held the purse strings, she owned him. That was why he was helping her. That was why he was forging documents and paying off notaries. If he stopped helping her, she would cut him off. And unlike me, Ethan did not know how to survive on minimum wage. He had never worked a double shift in his life. She has both of us, I whispered. She cut me off to destroy me, and she kept him close to control him. Nina looked at me, her eyes fierce. She is using him as a soldier, but soldiers who are only there for the money? They tend to defect when the war gets too dangerous. I looked at the tax filing again. We have a weak link. I said, Ethan was terrified of being poor. If I could prove that his involvement in the fraud was going to cost him more than my mother was paying him, he might flip. I gathered the papers. I had the notary. I had the storage logs. I had the proof of Ethan's financial dependence. I was not just building a case anymore. I was building a trap. The library computer screen flickered with the low refresh rate of public infrastructure, but the data it displayed was high-definition misery. I sat in the back corner of the Lakehurst Public Library, scrolling through the wreckage of my brother's life. Nina had found the tax dependency, but that was just the surface. I dug deeper into Summit Ridge Auto Imports. It was not a business. It was a graveyard of bad decisions. I pulled up the Vermont Secretary of State filings. The company had been dissolved administratively 2 years ago for failure to file an annual report. Yet, Ethan still had a website up, claiming he was the CEO of a boutique logistics partner for European markets. I checked the county court records. 3 liens, one from a landlord for unpaid commercial rent, one from a leasing company for a default on a delivery van, and one from a credit card company for $25,000. The dates were telling. The credit card judgment had come down 3 months before my father died. The commercial rent default was 2 months after. I leaned back in the hard wooden chair. The timeline was a map of desperation. Ethan had been drowning for years. My father had likely been bailing him out quietly. And when Dad died, the safety net vanished. Enter Diane. She had stepped in, not just to help, but to own him. The familial support line on his child support hearing was not a gift. It was a salary for being her henchman. I printed the pages. The printer whirred and spat out the proof that the Martin family success story was a lie built on debt and denial. Ethan was not a golden child. He was an indentured servant in a BMW. I needed to understand the mechanics of my own destruction. Julian Voss had given me a breadcrumb, but I needed the whole loaf. I sent him a text from my burner phone. I need to understand the mechanism. Who do I talk to? He replied an hour later. Just a name and a number. Carmen Hale. She is expensive, but she knows where the bodies are buried. Tell her I sent you. I called Carmen Hale. She was a compliance attorney based in Burlington. She agreed to a 30-minute consultation, pro bono, as a favor to Julian, which told me Julian had more pull or more guilt than he let on. I took the bus to Burlington on my next day off. Carmen's office was in a renovated mill building, exposed brick and glass walls. She was a sharp woman in her 50s with gray hair cut in a severe bob and glasses that looked like they cost more than my rent. "Sit down." "Grace," she said, not looking up from a file. "Julian tells me you were the target of a reputational event. I was fired from Alder and Fitchwell." I said, "An anonymous ethics complaint." Carmen closed the file and looked at me. "Let me guess. You were accused of leaking client data? Or perhaps internal trading?" "Leaking data." I said. Carmen nodded. "It is the classic play. It is hard to disprove, and it scares the hell out of risk management departments. Julian said it was a controlled event." I said. "He said there was a strategy document from a firm called Briar Hollow." Carmen took off her glasses. "If Briar Hollow was involved, then yes, it was bought and paid for. They do not do casual work. They specialize in distressed asset acquisition. Usually, that means buying companies that are failing, but sometimes it means removing obstacles." "I was an obstacle?" I asked. "I was a junior partner track consultant. I was not a CEO." Carmen leaned forward. "You were an obstacle to someone. Maybe you were asking the wrong questions on an audit. Maybe you were close to finding something you should not have seen. Or maybe—" She paused. "Maybe what?" "Maybe you were just the leverage," she said. "Sometimes they destroy a person not because of what that person knows, but to pressure someone else, a family member, perhaps." I felt a chill. My father was already dead when I was fired. Ethan was a mess. Who was being pressured? Or, Carmen continued, "The goal was simply to remove you from the board, to make you insolvent and desperate, so you would lose your standing. My mother." I said, "She wanted me back under her control." Carmen shrugged. "It is possible. But here's the thing about these ethics complaints. To make them stick, you need internal-looking documentation, emails that look like they came from you, logs that match your login times." "How do they get that?" I asked. "Hackers. Sometimes." Carmen said, "But usually?" "It is easier. They get it from someone who has access to your devices, someone who knows your passwords, someone who can sit at your laptop when you are in the shower." I thought about the weekends I spent at my parents' house before Dad died. My laptop sitting on the kitchen island, my phone charging on the counter, Ethan borrowing my iPad to watch movies, my mother asking for help logging into her email, watching me type my passwords. "If a family member provided your credentials to a firm like Briar Hollow," Carmen said quietly, "then that family member is not just toxic, they are a co-conspirator in corporate espionage." I left Carmen's office with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. It wasn't just that my mother hated me, it was that she had treated me like a tactical objective. She had invested money, likely the money she was stealing from the estate, to hire a firm to ruin me. I went home and tore my apartment apart. I was looking for an old external hard drive, a cheap plastic brick I had bought 5 years ago to back up my personal laptop before I switched to a company machine. I had almost thrown it out 3 times. I found it in a shoebox of winter socks. I plugged it into my laptop. The drive whirred and clicked, protesting the wake-up call. I opened the email archive. It was a snapshot of my life from before the crash. Recipes sent to my mom, jokes sent to college friends, boring logistical emails about car insurance. I searched for my mother's email address, Diane M65. Hundreds of results. Most were mundane. "Sunday dinner? Dad is asking about the mower. Did you see this article?" But I was looking for something else. I was looking for the malice Carmen had described. I sorted by date. I went back to the year before my father died. I found an email thread with the subject line, FW, loan repayment. It was a thread between my mother and Ethan. She had accidentally forwarded the entire chain to me when she meant to just send me a receipt for a dress she had bought for me. At the time, I had ignored the bottom part. Now, I read it. "Ethan, my mother had written, stop asking for more cash. I cannot move any more from the joint account without Joe noticing. You need to handle your own mess." "But Mom," Ethan had replied, "Grace makes 6 figures. Ask her." And then, my mother's response. The timestamp was 3 years ago. Grace is not going to help us. She thinks she is better than this family. She needs a lesson. Ethan, she will not listen until she loses something. I am working on a way to bring her back down to where she belongs. Just be patient. I stared at the screen. She needs a lesson. It was not a sudden snap decision when I was fired. It was not a reaction to a fight. She had been planning it. I am working on a way. She had resented my success. She had resented my independence, and she had plotted to take it away, systematically, so she could be the savior, or the warden. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Hot and angry, I wiped it away furiously. I had always made excuses for her. She is grieving. She is lonely. She just wants us close. No, she was a predator. I took a screenshot of the email. I added it to the receipts folder. The grief I had been carrying, the heavy, wet blanket of sadness, began to evaporate. In its place, something harder formed, like iron cooling in a mold. 2 days later, the war escalated. I was at the bistro, slicing lemons for the water pitchers, when my phone buzzed. It was my cousin, Sarah. We were not close, but we were friendly. Grace, the text read, I do not want to get involved, but you need to see this. She sent a screenshot. It was a Facebook message Diane had sent to my Aunt Carol, my Uncle Bob, and 3 of my cousins. I am asking for prayers for Grace. Diane wrote, We have found out she has been stealing from clients at the restaurant to support her habit. The manager called me in tears. We are trying to get her into rehab, but she refuses. If she asks for money, please, for her own good, say no. I nearly dropped the knife. Stealing from clients. Her habit, it was a lie so bold, so specific, that it sounded true. She was inoculating the family against me. If I reached out to tell them about the fraud, they would just see it as the rantings of a drug addict. My first instinct was to post a status. I am not on drugs. I am working double shifts. She is lying. But I heard Nina's voice in my head. Public shaming can backfire. If I posted, I looked defensive. I looked messy. I took a deep breath. I walked into the manager's office. David? I asked. He looked up. Yeah, Grace? My mother is telling my extended family that you called her in tears saying I was stealing. David's jaw dropped. What? I have never spoken to your mother in my life, and you are not stealing. I need you to write that down. I said, just a quick email to me, confirming that no such call happened and that my employment is in good standing. David looked at me with pity, but he nodded. This is insane. Grace, you know that, right? I know. I said, just write the email. He did. I saved it. I did not reply to Sarah. I did not reply to Diane. I let the silence hang there. Let them think I was ashamed. Let them think they had won. The knockout punch came on Friday. I got home from work to find a notice from the Lakehurst County Court taped to my door. It was not a criminal summons. It was civil. Small Claims Court. Plaintiff. Diane Martin. Defendant. Grace Martin. I opened the packet in my kitchen, my hands trembling with rage. She was suing me. Statement of claim. The defendant, Grace Martin, owes the plaintiff the sum of $4,800 for unpaid personal loans provided between 2021 and 2024 for living expenses and legal fees. She had attached a spreadsheet. It listed dates and amounts. November, $500. December, $800. I had never borrowed a dime from her, not once. When I was fired, I lived on my savings until they ran dry. Then I got the waitressing job. I had eaten ramen noodles for 6 months to avoid asking her for help. She was fabricating debt. She was trying to get a legal judgment against me to garnish my wages, or just to humiliate me in a public courtroom. She thought I wouldn't show up. She thought I would be too embarrassed to stand in front of a judge and have my mother call me a moocher. She expected a default judgment. I called Nina. She is suing me. I said, small claims? Nina asked. Yes, $5,000. For loans that never happened. Bring the paperwork to the bistro, Nina said. Tonight? Nina read the filing while I worked the dinner rush. Every time I passed her table, she was highlighting something new. When the restaurant cleared out, I sat down with her. She is sloppy, Nina said, grinning. What? Look at the spreadsheet, Nina said. She lists these loans, right? She has dates. January 4th, $200. March 10th, $500. Yeah. So, she has to prove she gave you the money, Nina said. In small claims, the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. She needs canceled checks, Venmo receipts, or bank transfer logs. She probably forged those too. I said, maybe, Nina said. But look at this entry here. She pointed to a line item from August. Loan for car repair, $1,200. She listed the source of funds. Nina said, see this account number next to it? Transfer from account ending in 4492. I looked at the number, 4492. It rang a bell, a loud, dissonant bell. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I had taken of my credit report. The report where I discovered the identity theft. I zoomed in on the Northlake Federal line of credit, the one she had reopened, disbursement account. Joint checking ending in 4492. My breath caught. It is the same account, I whispered. She is suing you for a loan, Nina said, eyes wide. And she claims the money came from the account she used to launder the stolen funds from your line of credit. I stared at the paper. She is claiming she loaned me money, I said slowly. But that money actually came from my own line of credit that she stole. She is suing me for my own stolen money. It is bold, Nina said, but it is also a fatal error. If she brings those bank records into court to prove the loan, she is also bringing in the records that prove the identity theft. She is handing us the murder weapon because she thinks it is a gavel. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. She thinks I won't show up. I said, exactly. Nina said, she thinks you are the scared little girl who ran away from her corporate job. She thinks you will just pay it to make it go away. Or default. I looked at the court date. November 12th, 9:00 a.m. I am going. I said, Grace. Nina warned, it will be ugly. She will lie on the stand. She will cry. She will tell the judge you are a drug addict. Let her. I said, I do not care what she says. I care about what she signs. I took the pen from Nina and circled the account number. I need to subpoena the bank records for account 4492. I said, can we do that in small claims? You can ask the judge for an order. Nina said, or, since your name is technically on that joint account, even if you haven't used it in years, you can just go to the bank and demand them. I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. It is a joint account. I said, I am still an owner. Then you walk into that bank tomorrow, Nina said, and you print 5 years of history. You find every transfer to Ethan. You find the deposit from your stolen line of credit, and you find the withdrawals for the storage unit bribes. I leaned back. The pieces were locking together. She wants a legal battle? I said, I will give her one. The next morning, I walked into the main branch of the bank that held the joint account. I had my ID. I had my birth certificate. I would like to access my account ending in 4492. I told the teller. She checked my ID. It matched. She did not know I had been estranged. She did not know about the war. To her, I was just a customer. She printed the statements, a stack of paper an inch thick. I sat in my car and flipped through them. It was all there. The transfers to Summit Ridge Auto, the cash withdrawals at the ATM near the storage unit, the deposit of $12,000 from Northlake Federal, my stolen credit, and the so-called loans to me. They were transfers to an account I didn't recognize, or they were cash withdrawals she just labeled Grace in her own checkbook register. She had built a paper castle, but she had built it on a foundation of fraud. I drove home. I placed the bank statements in the receipts folder. Physically this time. I looked at the calendar. The court date was in 10 days. I sent a text to Julian. I am going to court. I need to know if Briar Hollow has any active surveillance on me. He replied instantly. They consider the file closed. You are low priority. You are just a waitress to them now. Good. That meant they weren't watching. That meant my mother was operating alone. I looked at the small claims notice again. Plaintiff. Diane Martin. She wanted her day in court. She wanted to stand in front of a judge and play the victim. She wanted to cement her narrative that I was the failure and she was the martyr. She had no idea that I was bringing the one thing she couldn't cry her way out of: math. I picked up my phone and texted Nina. Draft the response. I am appearing, and I am countersuing. For what? Nina asked. For the truth. I typed, then I deleted it. That was too poetic. For malicious prosecution and fraud. I typed. I hit send. The waitress was gone. Grace Martin, the consultant who specialized in finding the cracks in corporate structures, was back. And I had found the crack in my mother's life. It was her arrogance. The fluorescent lights of the Lakehurst County Small Claims Court hummed with a headache-inducing frequency that seemed designed to make everyone in the room confess just to get out of there. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded on top of a manila folder. To my right, sitting in the gallery just behind the wooden partition, was Nina Park. She was technically just a member of the public today, but her presence felt like a loaded weapon on the table. On the other side of the aisle, my mother, Diane Martin, was putting on a masterclass in performative grief. She was wearing a navy blue cardigan, modest, respectable, and a silver locket that I knew held a picture of my father. She kept touching it, a subtle reminder to the judge and the room that she was a widow doing her best. She had brought a tissue, which she dabbed at perfectly dry eyes. The judge, a weary-looking man named Judge Henderson, called the case Martin versus Martin, he said, looking over his spectacles. My mother stood up. She looked small, vulnerable. It was an act I had seen her perform 1,000 times to get out of speeding tickets or to return worn clothing to department stores. Your Honor, Diane said, her voice trembling just the right amount, I am suing my daughter, Grace, for the repayment of $4,800 in personal loans. I tried to handle this privately. I really did. But since she lost her job at the consulting firm, she paused, looking down at her hands. She has been struggling. Diane continued. I gave her money for rent. I gave her money for food. I dipped into my own retirement savings because a mother helps her child. But she refuses to pay me back. She calls me names. She has cut off contact. I am on a fixed income. Your Honor, I cannot afford to just give this money away to someone who refuses to help herself. She looked at me then. The look was sad, but her eyes were hard as flint. Grace is ungrateful, Diane said, adding a teary sniffle. She is lazy. She works a dead-end job and expects me to fund her lifestyle. I just want what is fair. Judge Henderson looked at me. Ms. Martin? What say you? I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I had spent the last 48 hours rehearsing this with Nina. I knew exactly what Diane wanted. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to shout that she was a liar, that she was the one who stole from me. If I did that, I would look like the unstable daughter she had painted me to be. I did not scream, Your Honor. I said, my voice steady, I deny that these funds were loans. I deny that I ever requested or received money from the plaintiff for the purposes she stated. Diane gasped. Grace, how can you lie like that in a court of law? The judge held up a hand. Ms. Martin, please address the bench. I opened my folder. I pulled out the spreadsheet Diane had submitted as evidence, the list of so-called loans. The plaintiff has submitted a list of transfers. I said, however, the documentation provided is incomplete. It lists dates and amounts, but it does not verify the source of the funds or the destination accounts in a way that confirms a loan agreement. I picked up the bank statement I had printed, the one from the joint account. Furthermore, Your Honor, I have reason to believe that the source of these funds requires further examination. I have recently obtained bank records indicating that the account used to generate these transfers is, in fact, a joint account bearing my own name. Diane stiffened. She stopped dabbing her eyes. I am asking for a continuance. Your Honor, I said, I need time to subpoena the full transaction history from Northlake Community Bank to prove that the funds the plaintiff claims she loaned me were, in reality, moved from an account where I am a legal owner. I also intend to subpoena records regarding the source of the deposits into that account, which I believe will show they originated from a line of credit opened in my name without my knowledge. The room went quiet. The phrase "without my knowledge" hung in the air. Diane stepped forward, forgetting her fragile act for a second. That is ridiculous. That is family money. She is just trying to stall because she is broke. Judge Henderson looked at Diane, then at me. If the defendant is a joint owner on the account the funds came from, that complicates the definition of a loan. The judge said, and if there is a question regarding the origin of the funds, the court needs to see the full paper trail. He banged his gavel. Motion for continuance granted. We will reconvene in 3 weeks. The plaintiff is ordered to provide full bank statements for the account in question, and the defendant is granted leave to submit her own financial evidence. Diane stood there, mouth slightly open. She had expected a quick shame session. She had expected me to crumble or default. She had not expected a procedural delay that would force her to open her books. I sat down. I did not look at her. I looked at Nina, who gave me a microscopic nod. Round one was ours. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like I was walking on a wire. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me with a cold, shaking nausea. I just wanted to get to the exit, find fresh air, and breathe. "Grace!" The voice came from the alcove near the water fountains. I turned. It was Ethan. My brother looked terrible. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but slept in. His tie was loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. He wasn't the arrogant man driving the BMW anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. I stopped. "What do you want?" "Ethan?" He walked over, checking over his shoulder to make sure Diane wasn't behind him. She was still inside, arguing with the court clerk about the date. "You have to drop this," he said, his voice a harsh whisper. "You cannot drag the bank records into court." "Why not?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Because it proves she is paying your bills? Or because it proves you helped her steal my identity?" Ethan flinched. "Grace, please. You do not understand. She is going to lose it. If you push her, she stops paying. If she stops paying, I lose the car. I lose the apartment. I have child support due next week. If I miss a payment, they suspend my license. That sounds like a you problem," I said coldly. He grabbed my arm. I pulled away sharply. "Do not touch me," I said. "Grace, listen," he pleaded. His eyes were wet. "She promised me. She said if I helped her with the paperwork, she would fix everything. She said she would pay off my debts. She said she would make sure I was set up so I wouldn't have to worry anymore." "What paperwork?" "Ethan?" I asked, stepping closer. "The storage unit authorization? The fake notary log?" He went pale. He looked around again, terrified. "She made me do it," he whispered. "She said Dad's trust was going to ruin us. She said you were going to take everything because Dad liked you better. She told me I had to choose sides. You are 35 years old. Ethan," I said, "you didn't choose a side. You chose a paycheck, and now you are an accessory to fraud." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "I can't go to jail. Grace, please, just pay her the $5,000. I will find a way to pay you back later. Just make this stop." I looked at him. I remembered when we were kids. He used to defend me on the playground. Now he was a hollow shell of a man, filled up with our mother's poison and his own greed. "I cannot stop it," I said. "She sued me. She started this. You can drop the counter evidence," he said. "Just let her win this one." "And let her ruin my name again?" I asked. "No." I turned to walk away. "Grace!" he called out, desperate. "She is not going to stop. You know how she is. She will burn the whole house down just to rule the ashes." I looked back at him. "Then you better get out of the house." Ethan. 2 days later. The atmosphere in Carmen Hale's office was very different from the courtroom. It was quiet, professional, and terrifyingly serious. Riley Latham sat in a leather chair, twisting a strap of her purse until her knuckles were white. She looked even younger in person, just a kid in a hoodie and jeans, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Carmen sat behind her desk, a pen poised over a document. I sat next to Carmen, Riley. Carmen said, her voice calm but authoritative. I want to be very clear about where you stand. You are currently facing potential charges for notary fraud and conspiracy. However, Ms. Martin is willing to forego filing a complaint with the Secretary of State if you provide a truthful, sworn affidavit regarding the events of October 14th. Riley looked at me. Her eyes were red. You promise you won't report me? I just want the truth. Riley, I said, I am not out to destroy your life. I just need to protect mine. Riley nodded, swallowing hard. Okay. Carmen turned on a recording device. State your name for the record. Riley Latham. Carmen guided her through the questions. Riley's voice shook, but she answered. She admitted that Diane contacted her directly. She admitted that she met them at Harborgate Storage. She admitted that Joseph Martin was not present. And the signature? Carmen asked. Who signed the name Joseph Martin on the authorization form? Riley took a breath. The son did. Ethan. He practiced it a few times on a piece of scrap paper on the hood of the car. Then he signed the form. And you notarized it? Yes. Did you receive payment? Yes. $500. Cash. Diane gave it to me in an envelope. And did Mrs. Martin say anything to you regarding the legality of this act? Riley looked down at her lap. She said that technically it wasn't a big deal because it was just family property. But she said if I ever told anyone, she would say I tricked them. She said she knows people in the state government. She said she would ruin me. Carmen wrote something down. That is witness intimidation, she noted dryly. When the affidavit was typed up, Riley signed it. Her hand was shaking, but she did it. Carmen notarized Riley's signature with a firm, decisive stamp. You did the right thing, Carmen said. Now, go home. Do not talk to Diane Martin. If she contacts you, you refer her to me. Riley fled the office like it was on fire. Carmen handed me the document. You have the smoking gun. Grace, this proves the storage unit access was a felony. It proves they stole whatever was in there. I said, exactly, Carmen said, and now we need to find out what that was. My phone rang. It was Julian Voss. I answered it on the second ring. Julian? I found the link, he said without preamble. His voice was tight, clipped. Tell me, I said. I dug into the vendor list for Alder and Fitchwell. He said, the consulting firm you worked for, Briar Hollow Capital, the firm that wrote the takedown strategy on you. They have a portfolio company called Vericidine. Vericidine? I asked. That sounds familiar? It should, Julian said. Vericidine was the IT security vendor for your firm. They managed the email servers and the data loss prevention software. My stomach dropped. Are you saying the security company was in on it? I am saying that Briar Hollow owns the security company, Julian said. And Briar Hollow was hired to contain you. If they wanted to plant evidence, fake logs, time-stamped emails that never existed, they didn't need to hack the system from the outside. They owned the system from the inside, but they still needed a trigger. I said, they needed something to make the investigation look legitimate. Right, Julian said. They needed a credible tip, and they needed personal details to make the fake emails sound like you. My mother, I whispered. The timeline matches, Julian said. Briar Hollow acquires Vericidine in January. Your mother sends the email to Ethan about teaching you a lesson in February. You get fired in May. It was a machine, a massive, expensive corporate machine, and my mother had simply bought a ticket to ride it. She had provided the personal data, my writing style, my schedule, my passwords from home, and they had used their IT access to frame me. Thank you. Julian, I said, be careful. Grace, he warned, you are connecting dots that people paid a lot of money to keep separate. Armed with Riley's affidavit, Nina and I went back to Harborgate Storage. This time, we didn't ask politely. We slapped the affidavit on the counter and demanded the security footage. The manager, looking pale, handed over a USB drive. We went back to my apartment to watch it. We sat on my bed. The laptop balanced on a stack of books. The video was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. Date, October 14th. Time, 10:02 a.m. I saw my mother's car pull up. I saw Ethan get out. I saw Riley Latham standing awkwardly by the gate. I watched Ethan sign the paper on the hood of the car. Just like Riley said. Then I watched them enter the unit. They were inside for 20 minutes. When they came out, Ethan was carrying 3 boxes. My mother was carrying 1 small file box. They set them down to open the trunk. The camera angle was high. Looking down, I could read the Sharpie writing on the side of the boxes. Box 1. Taxes, 2010-2018. Box 2. Dad, trust documents. My heart hammered. There it was, the trust documents. But it was the box in my mother's hands that made the air leave the room. It was a small, white banker's box. Written on the side in my mother's distinct, looping cursive was, Grace, employment. I hit pause. I stared at the screen. That box wasn't my father's. It was hers. She had brought a box into the unit, or she had filled it with things she found there. Why does she have a box labeled Grace? Employment? Nina asked quietly. I felt a wave of nausea. Because she has been collecting things. I said, offer letters, contracts, maybe even the stuff I threw away when I moved. She's been building a dossier on me for years. It felt like a violation deeper than the identity theft. It was surveillance. She had been keeping a file on my life, waiting for the moment she could weaponize it. She hadn't just reacted to my success. She had studied it so she could dismantle it. She treats you like an enemy combatant, Nina said. Her voice filled with disgust. No, I said, watching the frozen image of my mother's face. She treats me like a project that went over budget and needed to be liquidated. That evening, I was walking up the stairs to my apartment when Mara Klein, my landlord, opened her door. Grace, she said, can I talk to you? I tensed. I had paid the rent. I was current. Yes. Mara? She looked uncomfortable. She was twisting her ring. That woman called again. Mara said, your mother. I closed my eyes. What did she say this time? She offered to pay your rent for the next 6 months. Mara said. I looked at her, confused. She wants to pay my rent? No. Mara said. She offered to pay me the equivalent of 6 months' rent if I agreed to terminate your lease. She said she wanted to help you move back home for your own good, and that you wouldn't leave unless you had nowhere else to go. The cruelty was so breathtaking I almost laughed. She was trying to buy my eviction. She wanted to make me homeless so she could swoop in and rescue me. Did you take it? I asked. Mara shook her head. I told her I don't run that kind of business, and I told her if she called me again, I would file harassment charges. Thank you, Mara, I said, my voice thick. You are a good tenant. Grace, Mara said, and that woman, there is something wrong with her. You be careful. I sat in my apartment, the walls feeling tighter than usual. I had the affidavit. I had the video. I had the bank records. I had the landlord's testimony. I pulled up Facebook. I typed a status update. To everyone in the family, the rumors about me are false. Here's the proof that Diane Martin has been stealing my identity, forging documents, and bribing people to destroy my reputation. I hovered the mouse over the attach image button. I could upload the affidavit. I could upload the video of the storage unit. I could burn her to the ground in 10 seconds. My finger hovered over the mouse. It would feel so good. It would be instant vindication. My phone rang. It was Carmen. Do not do it, Grace, she said. How did you know? I asked. Because you are angry, and you have ammo. Carmen said, but listen to me. If you post that online, you lose control of the narrative. She will claim the documents are fake. She will claim you hacked her. She will sue you for defamation. And even if you win, it will take years. So I just sit on it? I asked. No. Carmen said, you execute the strategy. You do not want to win on Facebook. You want to win in a way that is irreversible. You want witnesses who cannot scroll past. The holiday party. I said, Sunday. Carmen said, she invited the whole family, right? Yes. Then that is your courtroom. Carmen said, public shaming can backfire, but the truth, delivered in person, with evidence, that is a verdict. Sunday was 3 days away. The family group chat, which I was still blocked from but Sarah was monitoring, was buzzing with preparations. Diane. Can't wait to see everyone. It has been such a hard year. But having family together is the only thing that matters. Aunt Carol. We are bringing the pies. Ethan. I will be there early to help set up. He was still playing the part. He was terrified. But he was still following orders. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I did not go to work. I used my sick days. I went to the print shop. I organized the folder. Exhibit A. The bank statements showing the theft. Exhibit B. The affidavit from Riley Latham. Exhibit C. The storage unit logs and video stills. Exhibit D. The tax returns showing Ethan as a dependent. Exhibit E. The email from 3 years ago. Grace needs a lesson. I bound them into a single, sleek black binder. It looked like a consulting deliverable. It looked like the work of the professional I used to be. On Saturday night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Diane. I know you are struggling. If you come tomorrow and apologize to the family for your behavior, we can put this behind us. I might even help you with your little legal problem. But if you don't show up, I will make sure you lose that waitress job too. I know the owner. I stared at the screen. She was threatening me one last time. She thought she held all the cards. She thought I was cornered. She had no idea that I wasn't coming to apologize. I was coming to collect. I typed my reply. 1 word, noted. I hit send. I turned off the lights in my apartment. I looked at the binder sitting on my table. Tomorrow, the waitress was staying home. Tomorrow, the daughter was staying home. Tomorrow, the prosecutor was going to Briarwood Hills. The driveway of the house in Briarwood Hills was lined with luxury SUVs and sedans, the kind of cars that gleamed under the streetlights even in the dead of winter. The house itself was a monstrosity of colonial revival architecture, draped in tasteful white lights that cost more to install than I made in 3 months at the bistro. A massive wreath hung on the front door, a perfect circle of evergreen and velvet, signaling to the world that the Martin family was festive, prosperous, and whole. I parked my rusted sedan a block away. I did not want my car to be the first thing they judged. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was wearing black slacks and a gray sweater. No jewelry, no makeup to hide the circles under my eyes. I did not look like the corporate rising star I used to be, nor did I look like the drug-addled waitress my mother had described to the family group chat. I looked like a blank slate. I picked up the black binder from the passenger seat. It was heavy, filled with the paper trail of my mother's betrayal. I walked up the long driveway. The air was biting cold, the kind that freezes the inside of your nose, but I did not feel it. My nervous system had gone quiet. I was operating on a frequency of calm that felt almost mechanical. I rang the doorbell. Laughter drifted through the wood. The sound of my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, the people I had grown up with, the people who had seen the screenshots calling me a loser. The door opened. It was my Aunt Carol, holding a glass of eggnog. "Grace?" she said, her smile faltering instantly. "Hi, Aunt Carol," I said. She blocked the doorway slightly, glancing back at the party. We didn't think you were coming. Your mother said you were in a bad place." "I am in a very clear place," I said. "May I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. The warmth of the house hit me, carrying the scent of cinnamon, roast beef, and expensive perfume. I walked into the foyer. The conversation in the living room didn't stop all at once. It died in waves as people noticed me. First the cousins near the door, then the uncles by the fireplace, and finally, my mother. Diane was holding court in the center of the room, wearing a red silk dress that made her look regal. She was laughing at something Mrs. Gable from the church choir had said. When she saw me, the laugh froze. For a second, I saw pure panic in her eyes. But she was a professional. She masked it instantly with a look of exaggerated pity. "Grace," she said, her voice loud enough to carry to the back of the room. "Oh, honey, I am so glad you decided to come." She walked toward me, arms open, playing the benevolent matriarch welcoming the prodigal daughter. Are you okay? She asked, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that everyone could still hear. You look tired. Are you using again? The room went deadly silent. My cousin Sarah, who was standing by the punch bowl, looked down at her shoes. Uncle Bob looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. I did not hug her. I did not step back. I just stood there, holding the binder against my chest. I am not using drugs. Diane, I said, I never have been. And I think we should sit down. Diane let out a nervous little laugh. Oh, Grace, you are confused. This is a party. We are celebrating. Why don't you go into the kitchen and get a plate? I will have Ethan drive you home later so you don't have to worry about. You know, she was trying to herd me away. She wanted me hidden in the kitchen, eating scraps, while she explained my confusion to the guests. I walked past her into the dining room. The long mahogany table was set for dinner, crystal glasses sparkling. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, my father's chair, and placed the black binder on the wood. The thud was the loudest sound in the house. I am not confused, I said, turning to face the room. And I am not hungry. Diane's smile vanished. Grace, do not make a scene. You are embarrassing yourself. I looked at the extended family gathered in the archway. Aunt Carol, Uncle Bob, the cousins, Mrs. Gable. They were staring like they were watching a car crash in slow motion. I am asking everyone to stay, I said, my voice steady and clear, because what I have to say concerns the Martin name, and it concerns my father's wishes. Diane lunged forward, grabbing my arm. That is enough. Get out. I looked at her hand on my arm, then up at her face. If you touch me again, I said quietly, I will call the police. And unlike the fake calls you made to my landlord, this one will have a report number attached to it. Diane recoiled as if burned. Sit down. Diane, I said. She looked around the room, looking for support, but nobody moved. The tension was too thick. Curiosity had paralyzed them. Diane sat in the chair to my right, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan was standing in the corner, looking like he was about to vomit. I opened the binder. I am not here to ruin dinner. I said, I am here to correct the record. For the last month, my mother has told you all that I am a drug addict, a thief, and a failure. She disowned me in a text message that you all saw. I flipped to the first tab. But here is what you didn't see. I held up the page. On October 2nd, 3 days after she sent that text, a complaint was filed against me at my workplace, accusing me of theft. The IP address for that complaint traces back to this house. I flipped the page. On October 5th, my landlord received a call from a woman claiming to be a relative, offering to pay my back rent if the landlord agreed to evict me. I looked at Aunt Carol. She tried to make me homeless. Carol. She didn't offer to help. She offered to pay for my eviction. Murmurs started in the room. Diane sat rigid. That is a lie, Diane hissed. You are making this up. You are sick. I ignored her. I flipped to the next section. But those are just petty grievances. I continued. The real reason I am here is because of what happened on October 14th. I turned to Ethan. He flinched. Ethan, I said, do you want to tell them? Or should I read the affidavit? Ethan stared at the floor. He didn't speak. I held up the sworn statement from Riley Latham. This is a notarized affidavit from a mobile notary named Riley Latham. I said, she states that on October 14th, she was paid $500 in cash by Diane Martin to notarize a storage unit access form. She further states that the signature of my father, Joseph Martin, was forged on that document by my brother. Ethan. The room gasped. A collective, sharp intake of air. Forgery? Uncle Bob asked, stepping forward. Grace. That is a serious accusation. It is a felony. Bob, I said, and I have the video. I pointed to the laptop I had set up on the sideboard, though I didn't turn it on. The threat was enough. They accessed Dad's storage unit using a forged document. I said, they removed boxes labeled taxes and trust, and they removed a box labeled Grace, employment. I looked at my mother. Why do you have a box of my employment records? Diane? Why are you collecting my old contracts? Diane stood up, slamming her hand on the table. Because I am your mother, she shouted. I was protecting the family. You were out of control. I was a senior consultant at a top firm, I yelled back, my voice finally breaking its calm surface. I was successful. And you hated it. She hated it so much, I said, turning back to the room, dropping my voice again, that she stole $12,000 from me to fund a campaign to destroy it. I held up the bank records. This shows a transfer of $12,000 from a line of credit opened in my name, identity theft, into the joint account Diane controls. And here, I said, pointing to the highlighted lines, are the payments to Summit Ridge Auto Imports. I looked at Ethan. Ethan isn't running a business. I said, Summit Ridge has been dissolved for 2 years. He is living off these transfers. He is listed as a dependent on Diane's taxes. I looked at the family. The golden boy is broke. He helped her forge the documents because she promised to pay off his debts. Ethan let out a sound that was half sob, half groan. He slid down the wall, putting his head in his hands. It is true, Ethan choked out. Ethan! Diane shrieked. Shut up. I can't do it anymore. Mom! Ethan yelled, looking up, tears streaming down his face. She has the proof. She has the notary. I am not going to jail for you. The room fractured. Aunt Carol put her hand over her mouth. Mrs. Gable took a step back, clutching her purse. Diane looked at Ethan with pure venom. Then she turned to me. You ungrateful little brat, she spat. I did everything for this family. I kept us afloat. You think you are so smart? You think you are so innocent? You deserve to lose that job. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. You were getting too big for your britches. Grace, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. You were going to leave us behind. You were going to take the money and run. I just did what I had to do to keep you humble, to keep you here. And how did you do that? I asked softly. How did you know exactly who to contact at my firm? How did you know about the compliance protocols? Diane sneered. Because I read your files. I read the emails you left open on your computer when you came to visit. I knew about the data leak investigation before you did. The room went dead silent. I stared at her. I never told you about a data leak investigation. I said, the firm never made that public. They called it a reputational event. The only people who knew it was framed as a data leak were the partners, and the people who planted the leak. Diane froze. Her eyes widened as she realized what she had just said. She had admitted to knowing details of a confidential corporate investigation, details she could only know if she had been part of the setup. You framed me, I said. You fed my personal information to Briar Hollow Capital so they could engineer my firing. You destroyed my career because you were jealous. Diane sank back into her chair. She looked small now. The regal matriarch was gone, replaced by a bitter, caught woman. So what? She whispered. It is done. You are a waitress. You have no money. You have no power. You are nothing without this family. I closed the binder. Actually, I said, that brings me to the last thing. I reached into the pocket of the binder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of the document I had retrieved from the county court earlier that week. Not the addendum itself, but the notice of trigger. Dad knew. I said. Diane looked up. Knew what? He knew you would do this. I said. He left a letter with Thomas Bellamy. And he left an addendum to the trust. Diane laughed. A harsh, brittle sound. We destroyed that addendum. We drilled the box. There is nothing left. I shook my head. You destroyed the copy. Diane, you didn't understand how the trust was structured. The addendum wasn't a document that gave me money directly. It was a conditional distribution clause. I placed the paper on the table. Dad set it up so that the majority of the estate would go to you. I explained. Unless there was evidence of financial malfeasance or identity theft committed by the executor against a beneficiary, if such evidence was presented to the probate court, it triggers an automatic, independent forensic audit of the entire estate. Diane's face went gray. An audit? She whispered. An audit, I confirmed. Going back 10 years. Every check, every transfer, every asset you hid, every penny you stole from Dad while he was alive, and every penny you stole from us after he died. I leaned forward. And the trigger wasn't the document in the box. Diane, the trigger was a sworn affidavit from a beneficiary alleging fraud. I pointed to the paper. I filed the notice on Friday. I said, Carmen Hale submitted it to the probate judge. The estate is frozen as of this morning. You cannot access the accounts. You cannot sell the house. You cannot transfer a dime to Ethan. Diane looked at the room. She looked at the expensive furniture, the crystal glasses, the life she had built on lies. She realized, in that moment, that it was all gone. She looked at me with hate, but also with fear. You destroyed this family, she whispered. No, I said. I just turned on the lights. I picked up the binder. I am not here to punish you. Diane, the courts will do that. I am here to tell you that I have filed a formal police report for identity theft regarding the North Lake account, and I have filed a civil petition to have you removed as executor. I turned to the guests. I am sorry to ruin the party. I said, but I wanted you to know the truth from the source. My name is Grace Martin. I am not a loser, and I am done paying for my mother's sins. I turned and walked toward the door. The room fractured behind me. I heard Aunt Carol sobbing. I heard Uncle Bob asking Diane if it was true about the audit. I heard Ethan crying, asking what he was supposed to do about his car. Diane's voice rose above the din, shrill and desperate. Grace, you come back here. You fix this. I did not stop. Grace, I opened the front door. The cold night air hit me like a slap. Bracing and clean. It smelled of snow and pine, not perfume and rot. I walked down the driveway. My legs felt shaky, but my steps were firm. I had done it. I had walked into the fire and I had not burned. I reached my car and unlocked it. My hands were trembling now. The adrenaline crash finally hitting me. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel. It was over. The secret was out. The money was frozen. My mother's power was broken. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. It was a text from Julian. Did you do it? Then a text from Nina. I am at the bistro. Come have a drink. You are a legend. Then, a string of missed calls from Ethan. I took a deep breath, watching the condensation cloud the air in the cold car. I started the engine. The heater sputtered to life. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from a number I did not recognize. Area code 202, Washington, D.C. I picked it up. Subject, unknown. Message, if you triggered the audit on the Martin estate, you just woke up bigger people than your mom. Vericidine records are part of that estate's assets. Walk away now, or the next reputational event won't be controlled. I stared at the glowing screen, the audit. By freezing the estate and demanding a forensic accounting, I wasn't just exposing my mother's theft, I was exposing where the money went. And if the money went to Briar Hollow, if the money went to pay for illegal corporate espionage, I had just kicked a hornet's nest that was much larger than a suburban widow. My mother was just a client. I had just threatened the vendor. I looked back at the house. The lights were still on, but I could see shadows moving frantically in the windows. The perfect image was shattered. I put the car in gear. I was free of her. I had reclaimed my name. But as I pulled out onto the dark, icy road, I realized the story wasn't over. I had started a small fire to burn down a lie, and I had accidentally signaled a war. I gripped the wheel, noted. I thought. I drove into the dark, the taillights of my car cutting 2 red streaks through the night, driving toward a future I could not see, but one I would face on my own feet. Thank you so much for listening to My Mom Disowned Me for Being a Waitress. It has been a journey walking in Grace's shoes as she fought to reclaim her life from betrayal. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below and tell me which country or city you call home. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. What did you think of Grace's decision to trigger the audit? Do you think she should have walked away? Or was she right to risk everything for the truth? Share your thoughts in English in the comments section. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your receipts.